The rain had soaked through every layer she wore. And still, Seren Linwood stood at the servants' entrance of Ashworth Hall, shivering so violently her teeth clicked together like castanets. She had walked 7 miles from the village, 7 miles through mud and downpour, because she could not afford the coach fare. Her boots were ruined. Her dress clung to her like a second skin, and the housekeeper was staring at her as though she were something scraped off the bottom of a carriage wheel. "We've no positions available," the woman said, already closing the door. "Try the miller's wife in Hartwell. I hear she needs a scullery maid." "Please." Serene thrust her hand against the door, desperation overriding every lesson in propriety she had ever learned. "I can read. I can write. I speak French and Italian. I can teach music, needlework, watercolors. I managed my father's household for 6 years. Surely there must be something." The housekeeper's eyes narrowed, reassessing. Serene knew what she saw: the quality of the dress beneath the mud, the accent that did not belong to a servant, the desperate gentility of a woman who had fallen far and fast. "You're gentry," the housekeeper said slowly. "Or you were." "I was." "Then you know this isn't the place for you. His Grace doesn't hire ladies fallen on hard times. Too complicated. Too many expectations." She softened slightly. "Go to the vicar's wife. She sometimes takes in distressed gentlewomen." "The vicar's wife sent me here." The housekeeper's mouth pressed into a thin line. For a moment, something like pity flickered across her face. Then the door began to close again. "Mrs. Blackett." A voice cut through the rain like a blade through silk. Deep, cold, utterly commanding. "Why is there a drowned woman on my doorstep?" The housekeeper stepped back so quickly she nearly stumbled. "Your Grace, I was just sending her away. She came looking for work, but I explained we have no positions." Seren looked up and up. The man standing in the shadowed corridor was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark wool that made him look like a piece of the storm itself. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from marble. His eyes were the color of winter ice, pale gray with flecks of blue, and they studied her with an intensity that made her want to step backward into the rain. "What kind of work?" he asked. The housekeeper answered before Seren could speak. "Governess, she claims, though she looks more like a beggar at the moment, begging your Grace's pardon." "I wasn't asking you, Mrs. Blackett." Silence. The housekeeper's face flushed crimson. Those pale gray eyes turned back to Seren, waiting. "Any work," she said, and hated how small her voice sounded, how broken. "I can teach, I can sew, I can manage accounts, I can do anything you need. Please." The word cracked in her throat. "I need work." He stared at her for a long moment. The rain hammered against the stones behind her. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed the hour. 4 in the afternoon. She had not eaten since yesterday morning. "Come inside," he said finally. "You're dripping on the flagstones." She stepped through the doorway on legs that trembled, whether from cold or relief or sheer exhaustion, she could not tell. The warmth of the house hit her like a physical force, and she swayed, catching herself on the doorframe. "Mrs. Blackett, have someone draw a bath and find dry clothes. Something simple. Then bring her to my study." "Your Grace, surely you're not considering hiring this woman. We know nothing about her. She could be anyone. A thief, a fraud, my study. 1 hour." He turned and walked away, boots echoing against the marble floor. The housekeeper stared after him, mouth open. Then she turned to Seren with an expression that promised no kindness. "Come with me." The bath was lukewarm at best. The dress they gave her was black, shapeless, clearly meant for a housemaid. But it was dry and clean, and Seren had never been so grateful for anything in her life. She sat before the small fire in the servants' washroom, combing her fingers through her wet hair, trying to make herself presentable. She had no idea what the Duke wanted with her, no idea why he had intervened when his housekeeper was so clearly determined to send her away. But she knew this much. Whatever he offered, she would take it. She had no choice. Her mother was dead. Her father was dead. The creditors had taken everything: the house, the furniture, even the books she had loved since childhood. She had spent the last 3 months moving from village to village, seeking work, being turned away again and again because she was too educated for service and too poor for society. She had slept in barns, in church doorways, once in a ditch when she could walk no further. She was 24 years old, and she was utterly, completely alone. The clock struck 5. A footman appeared to escort her to the study. The Duke's study was dark, paneled in oak, lined with books that reached to the ceiling. A fire blazed in the hearth, but it did nothing to warm the coldness that seemed to emanate from the man himself. He stood behind his desk, not sitting, watching her enter with those unreadable eyes. "Close the door," she obeyed. "Sit." She sat, perching on the edge of the leather chair like a bird ready to take flight. He remained standing, looming over her. "Your name?" "Seren Linwood." Something flickered in his expression. Recognition. "Linwood. Hadrian Linwood's daughter." Her stomach dropped. "You knew my father." "I knew of him. The shipping investments. The scandal." His voice held no judgment, but no sympathy either. "He died owing half the men in London." "Yes." "And left you with nothing." "Yes." "No family? No friends willing to take you in?" "My mother's family disowned her when she married my father. They will not acknowledge me." She lifted her chin, refusing to look away despite the shame burning in her chest. "I have no one. Nothing. That is why I am here, begging for work from a man I have never met." He studied her for a long moment. Then he moved around the desk, closer, until he stood directly before her chair. This close, she could see the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched at his sides, as though he were fighting some internal battle. "I have 2 children," he said abruptly. "A son, Phineas, who is 7. A daughter, Mirabelle, who is 5. Their mother died 2 years ago." Seren waited, uncertain where this was leading. "Since her death, my daughter has not spoken a single word. My son has dismissed 4 governesses in 18 months. The last one left in tears after he released a jar of spiders in her bed." Something that might have been dark humor flickered across his face. "He is creative in his cruelty." "I'm sorry for your loss," Seren said carefully. "But I am not sure how this concerns my request for employment." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that stole her breath. Desperation. Raw, barely contained desperation. "I don't need a governess, Miss Linwood. I don't need a housekeeper, or a seamstress, or an account manager." He paused, jaw tightening. "My children need a mother. Someone who will stay. Someone who cannot be dismissed or frightened away. Someone bound to them by something stronger than wages." The fire crackled. The rain lashed against the windows. Seren's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't understand," she whispered, though she was beginning to, horribly, impossibly beginning to understand. "I am proposing marriage, Miss Linwood." His voice was flat, emotionless, as though he were discussing a business transaction. "You will become my wife. You will be mother to my children. In exchange, you will have a home, security, and all the comforts that come with being a duchess. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you are educated, capable, and desperate. Desperation breeds loyalty, in my experience. This is madness. Perhaps. He moved back behind his desk, putting distance between them. But it is a practical madness. You need shelter. I need someone who will not run. The arrangement benefits us both. And love? The word escaped before she could stop it. His expression shuttered completely, turning to stone. Love is not part of this arrangement, Miss Linwood. I am offering you a roof, a title, and a purpose. Nothing more. She should refuse. Every instinct screamed at her to run from this cold man and his broken children and his terrible bargain. But outside, the rain still fell, and she had nowhere to go, and her stomach ached with a hunger that had become her constant companion. If I refuse, then you walk back into that storm, and we never speak again. He was giving her a choice, except it wasn't a choice at all, and they both knew it. Seren closed her eyes, thought of the ditch where she had slept last week, the cold seeping into her bones, the terrifying certainty that she might not wake up. Thought of the way the innkeeper's wife had looked at her this morning, pity and disgust mingled together. Yes, she said. When she opened her eyes, the Duke was watching her with an expression she could not read. The wedding will be in 3 days, he said. I will have Mrs. Blackett prepare a room for you until then. He turned away, dismissing her. Your Grace. She rose, legs unsteady. You have not told me your name. He paused at the door, glancing back. For just a moment, something human flickered in those pale eyes. Caelan, he said. Caelan Thorne, Duke of Ashworth. Then he was gone, and Seren was alone in the fire-lit study, wondering what kind of devil's bargain she had just made. The room they gave her was at the end of a long corridor in the east wing, far from the family quarters. It was clean but cold, furnished with a narrow bed, a wardrobe, and a writing desk that looked like it had not been used in years. There were no flowers, no personal touches, nothing to suggest anyone had ever lived here with any degree of happiness. Seren sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the shapeless black dress, and tried to comprehend what she had agreed to. Marriage. To a stranger. A cold, imperious stranger who had looked at her like she was a ledger entry, a problem to be solved rather than a person to be known. But what was the alternative? Death in a ditch, starvation. The slow erosion of everything she had once been until there was nothing left but a hollow shell. At least this way she would survive. At least this way she would have purpose. She thought of her father, the way he had looked in those final months, gray-faced and trembling, watching everything he had built collapse around him. He had made bad investments, trusted the wrong partners, and when the shipping company failed, it had taken everything with it. The house in Mayfair, the country estate, the servants who had been with them for 20 years. All of it, gone in a matter of weeks. Her mother had died first, of a fever that everyone knew was really heartbreak. Her father had followed 3 months later, found in his study with an empty bottle of laudanum and a letter that said only, "Forgive me." There had been no forgiveness to give, only grief, and then anger, and then the terrible dawning realization that she was alone in the world, with nothing but the clothes on her back and debts she could never repay. The creditors had been kind, in their way. They had given her 2 days to pack her belongings before they seized the house. She had taken her mother's wedding ring, hidden in the lining of her dress, and a small miniature of her parents painted the year they married. Everything else was sold. That was 4 months ago. 4 months of walking, begging, sleeping in places no gentleman's daughter should ever see. 4 months of watching herself disappear piece by piece until she barely recognized the woman who stared back at her from shop windows. And now, She was going to be a duchess. The absurdity of it made her want to laugh or cry. She was not certain which. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Before she could answer, it swung open, and a small face peered around the frame. The boy. Phineas. He was small for 7, dark-haired like his father, with the same sharp cheekbones and watchful eyes. He studied her with an intensity that felt far too old for his years, assessing, calculating. "You're the new one," he said. Not a question. "I am. My name is Seren." "I know, Mrs. Blackett told us." He stepped fully into the room, arms crossed over his chest. "She says you're going to marry Father and be our new mother." "That appears to be the arrangement, yes." "The last governess cried when she left. The one before her said I was a demon child." He tilted his head, studying her. "Are you going to cry?" "I haven't decided yet." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, at an answer that wasn't what he expected. The one before the one who cried tried to make Mirabelle talk. She said it was unnatural for a child to be silent, and that she just needed firm discipline. His voice hardened, became brittle. Mirabelle had nightmares for weeks after that. "And what happened to the governess?" "I put a snake in her bed. A real one, not just spiders." His chin lifted defiantly. "Father dismissed her the next morning." Seren considered this, considered the fierce protectiveness beneath the cruelty, the desperate love that drove a 7-year-old boy to wage war against anyone who threatened his sister. "I will not try to make Mirabelle speak," she said quietly, "and I will not cry when you test me. But I should warn you, Phineas, I grew up in the countryside. Snakes do not frighten me. Neither do spiders. If you wish to drive me away, you will have to be far more creative." He stared at her, mouth slightly open. "Now." She rose, smoothing the shapeless dress. "I understand it is nearly time for supper. Perhaps you could show me the way to the dining room, since I am not yet familiar with the house." For a long moment, he did not move. Then, slowly, he uncrossed his arms. "Follow me," he said. "But do not expect Mirabelle to look at you. She does not look at anyone except me and Father. I will expect nothing except what she chooses to give." He led her through a maze of corridors, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors, and doors that remained firmly closed. The house was beautiful in the way of old things, all carved moldings and gleaming wood, and history layered so thick it was almost suffocating. But there was a coldness beneath the beauty, an emptiness that had nothing to do with temperature. This was a house in mourning, a house that had forgotten how to live. The dining room was cavernous, designed for parties of 30, now set for 4. The Duke sat at the head of the table, still dressed in black, still wearing that expression of carved stone. Beside him, in a chair that seemed to swallow her entirely, sat a small girl with dark curls and enormous gray eyes. Mirabelle. She did not look up when Seren entered, did not acknowledge her presence at all. She simply sat, perfectly still, staring at her empty plate with an intensity that suggested she was somewhere else entirely. "Miss Linwood," the Duke's voice cut through the silence. "Sit." She took the chair across from Mirabelle, painfully aware of the vast expanse of polished table between them. Phineas slid into the seat beside his sister, positioning himself like a guard. Servants appeared with soup. No one spoke. The clink of spoons against porcelain was deafening. "The wedding will take place Friday morning," the Duke said abruptly. "The vicar has agreed to perform the ceremony in the chapel here at Ashworth. It will be private. Only the household staff will attend." "No guests? No family?" "I have no family, and guests would mean explanations I have no interest in providing." He did not look at her. "The marriage will be announced afterward. By then, it will be too late for objections." You expect objections? Now he did look at her, and something dark moved behind his eyes. I expect complications. There are those who have opinions about how I should raise my children and whom I should marry. I prefer to present them with accomplished facts rather than opportunities for interference. Seren thought of the housekeeper's hostility, the way the servants had looked at her as she passed through the corridors. There was a story here, something she did not understand, and she was walking into it blind. "Who might object?" she asked carefully. "That is not your concern. If I am to be your wife, it seems like it should be." His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he would refuse to answer. Then, quietly, "My late wife's family, the Pembertons, they believe they should have control over the children's upbringing. They have made their opinions known to anyone who will listen. And marrying a stranger with no family and no fortune will quiet their objections. Marrying anyone will quiet their objections. Lady Isolde Pemberton has been positioning herself as the obvious choice for a new duchess since the day her sister died." His voice was flat, emotionless. "This marriage removes that possibility permanently." Serene set down her spoon. "So I am not just a mother for your children. I am a shield against your late wife's sister. You are whatever I need you to be, Miss Linwood. That is the nature of our arrangement." Across the table, Mirabelle had stopped eating entirely. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on nothing, utterly absent from the conversation happening around her. Beside her, Phineas watched Seren with that unsettling intensity, waiting for her reaction. "I understand," Seren said quietly. "I am a solution to multiple problems, a convenient answer to inconvenient questions. Yes. And what happens if Lady Pemberton refuses to accept this convenient answer? Then she will learn that I am not a man who tolerates interference." The Duke rose, conversation clearly over. "Finish your supper. Tomorrow Mrs. Blackett will give you a tour of the house and explain your duties. Friday you become Duchess of Ashworth. I suggest you prepare yourself accordingly." He walked out without another word. Seren sat in the echoing silence of the dining room, staring at the closed door. Phineas was watching her again, that sharp, assessing gaze that seemed to see everything. "He loved our mother," the boy said suddenly, "more than anything. When she died, part of him died too." "Phineas," Serene's voice was gentle, "you do not have to explain your father to me. I am not explaining him. I am warning you." He stood, reaching for his sister's hand. Mirabelle took it automatically, rising like a puppet on strings. "Do not expect him to love you. He does not have any love left." They walked out together, the small boy leading his silent sister, leaving Seren alone at the vast table with her cold soup and her colder future. She thought she had understood what she was agreeing to. Shelter in exchange for duty. Security in exchange for service. A practical arrangement between two desperate people. But sitting here in this mausoleum of a house, surrounded by the weight of grief she did not understand, she realized she had understood nothing at all. The wedding was exactly as the Duke had promised. Quick. Cold. Transactional. Seren stood in the small chapel at the edge of the Ashworth estate, wearing a gray dress that Mrs. Blackett had procured from somewhere, and repeated vows that felt like they belonged to someone else. The vicar was elderly, clearly uncomfortable with the unusual circumstances, rushing through the ceremony as though speed might lessen the impropriety of it all. The Duke stood beside her, rigid as a statue, his responses delivered in a voice utterly devoid of emotion. When the vicar instructed him to kiss the bride, he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, so briefly it barely qualified as contact. And then it was done. She was Saren Thorne, Duchess of Ashworth. The servants lined the corridor as they returned to the main house, a gauntlet of curious eyes and carefully blank expressions. Mrs. Blackett stood at the front, her disapproval radiating like heat from a forge. Whatever the housekeeper thought of this marriage, she was making no effort to hide it. "Your Grace." The Duke turned to her, and it took Serene a moment to realize he was addressing her. "Mrs. Blackett will show you to your chambers. I have business to attend to in the village. I will return before supper." "On our wedding day?" Something flickered in his expression, irritation perhaps, or discomfort. "I told you this was an arrangement, not a romance. I suggest you adjust your expectations accordingly." He walked away, and Seren was left standing in the entrance hall, newly married and utterly alone. "This way, Your Grace." Mrs. Blackett's voice dripped with false deference. "I will show you to the Duchess's chambers." The Duchess's chambers were in the west wing, connected to the Duke's rooms by a door that Mrs. Blackett pointedly informed her had been locked since the late Duchess's death. The rooms themselves were beautiful, all rose silk wallpaper and cream-colored furniture. But they had the same unlived in quality as the rest of the house, a museum exhibit rather than a home. "These were Her Grace's rooms," the housekeeper said, watching Serene's face carefully. "The late Duchess. Nothing has been changed since her passing." "Nothing?" "His Grace's orders. Everything is to remain exactly as she left it." Serene looked around. At the hairbrush still sitting on the vanity table, a few dark strands caught in its bristles. At the book on the nightstand, a ribbon marking a page that would never be finished. At the wardrobe, which she was certain still contained dresses that would never be worn again. She was not being given a room. She was being given a shrine. "I see," she said quietly. "Will there be anything else, Your Grace?" "No. Thank you, Mrs. Blackett." The housekeeper withdrew with a final loaded glance. The moment the door closed, Serene sank onto the edge of the bed, her bed now, the late Duchess's bed, and pressed her hands to her face. What had she done? She had married a man who did not want her, moved into a dead woman's rooms, become mother to children who had every reason to resent her existence. And for what? Security. Survival. A roof over her head and food in her stomach. It was enough. It had to be enough. She spent the afternoon exploring her new domain, carefully not touching anything that felt too personal, too sacred. The late Duchess had beautiful taste. Her jewelry box contained pearls that would have paid Serene's father's debts twice over. Her wardrobe held gowns in every color, each one more exquisite than the last. Serene closed the wardrobe door and did not open it again. By evening, she had changed into a simple dinner dress, one of the few items Mrs. Blackett had provided for her before the wedding, and made her way to the dining room. The children were already there. Phineas watching her with those sharp eyes, Mirabelle staring at nothing. The Duke's chair was empty. "His Grace sends his apologies," a footman announced. "He has been delayed in the village and will not return until late this evening." Of course he had been delayed. Of course he would not be present for her first dinner as Duchess. Why would their wedding day be any different from all the days that would follow? "Thank you," Serene said, and sat down. The meal was silent, as meals in this house seemed destined to be. Serene made no effort at conversation, sensing that any attempt would be unwelcome. Instead, she watched the children, studying them as one might study a puzzle that needed solving. Phineas ate mechanically, his attention divided between his plate and his sister. Every few minutes he would glance at Mirabelle, checking on her, making sure she was eating, making sure she was present. He had been doing this for 2 years, Serene realized, carrying a burden no 7-year-old should have to carry. And Mirabelle. The girl was there and not there, present in body but absent in every way that mattered. She chewed without tasting, swallowed without awareness. Her eyes remained fixed on some middle distance that no one else could see. What had happened to this child? What had she witnessed? What had she experienced that had stolen her voice and her presence so completely? Mirabelle. The name left Serene's lips before she could stop it. Both children went still. Phineas's eyes narrowed dangerously. Mirabelle did not react at all. "I am not going to ask you to speak," Serene said quietly. "I'm not going to ask you to do anything you do not want to do. I just wanted you to know that I see you. You are not invisible to me." Silence. Then, so quickly Serene almost missed it, Mirabelle's eyes flickered toward her. Just a glance. Just a fraction of a second of actual connection. Then it was gone, and the girl was staring at nothing again. But it had happened. Serene had seen it. Across the table, Phineas was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Not hostile, not anymore. Something closer to cautious evaluation. "She liked birds," he said abruptly. "Before. She would spend hours in the garden, watching the sparrows. Mother used to take her to feed the swans at the lake. Thank you for telling me that. I am not telling you for your benefit. I am telling you because if you try to force her to do things she doesn't want to do, I will make your life very unpleasant. I believe you." Serene met his gaze steadily. "But I am not your enemy, Phineas. I am not here to replace your mother or erase her memory. I am just here." "Why are you here, really?" "Because I had nowhere else to go. And because your father offered me a choice that was not really a choice at all." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. "He does that," the boy said quietly. "Offers choices that are not choices. Mother used to say it was his way of controlling things without admitting he was controlling them. Your mother sounds like she was very wise." "She was." His voice cracked slightly. "She was the best person I ever knew. And then she was gone. And father became." He stopped, teeth clenched. "He became what he is now. What was he before?" Phineas did not answer. He simply rose, took Mirabelle's hand, and led his sister from the room without another word. Serene sat alone at the vast table, surrounded by empty chairs and the weight of a grief she was only beginning to understand. Later that night, unable to sleep, she wandered the darkened corridors of Ashworth Hall. The servants had all retired. The house was silent except for the settling of old wood and the occasional sigh of wind against the windows. She found herself standing before a door in the west wing, one she had not yet opened. It was set apart from the others, larger, grander, and there was something about it that made her hesitate. She turned the handle. The door swung open, and she understood. This was the late Duchess's private sitting room, not the bedroom she had been given, but something more intimate, a sanctuary. The fire had burned down to embers, but someone had lit it recently. The room was warm, lived in a way the rest of the house was not. There were portraits everywhere. The late Duchess as a young woman, dark-haired and laughing. The Duchess holding an infant Phineas. The Duchess in the garden with a toddler Mirabelle reaching for butterflies. And in the center of the mantelpiece, a larger portrait of the Duke and Duchess together, painted perhaps a year before her death. They were looking at each other, not at the artist, and the expression on the Duke's face. Serene's breath caught. This was not the cold, stone-faced man she had married. This was a man utterly, completely in love. His eyes were soft, warm, filled with a tenderness that transformed his sharp features into something almost beautiful. He was looking at his wife like she was the center of his universe, like nothing else existed, like nothing else mattered. "You should not be in here." She spun around. The Duke stood in the doorway, still dressed in his traveling clothes, mud splattered on his boots. His face was pale, his expression terrible. "I'm sorry. The door was unlocked. I did not realize." "Get out, Your Grace." "I said get out." His voice was shaking now, with rage or grief or something too complex to name. "This room is not for you. This room will never be for you. Do you understand?" She understood. She understood with horrible, devastating clarity. He had not married her to give his children a mother. He had married her to build a wall against the world, to shield himself from pressure and expectation, to buy himself time and solitude to grieve. She was not a wife. She was not even a convenience. She was a ghost, a placeholder, a living woman standing in the shadow of a dead one. "I understand," she whispered. She walked past him, out of the room, down the corridor, back to the shrine that was now her bedroom. She closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. She had known this would not be easy. She had known he did not love her, did not want her, did not see her as anything more than a solution to a problem. But somehow, seeing that portrait, seeing what he had been and what he had lost, made it all so much worse. Because now she knew what she was competing against. Not another woman, not a rival she might someday defeat. A memory, a ghost, a love so profound that even death had not diminished it. And against that, she had nothing. No history, no connection, no claim on his heart at all. She sank onto the bed, staring at the locked door that connected her room to his. 3 days ago, she had been homeless, starving and desperate. Now she was a duchess, and she had never felt more alone in her life. The first week of marriage passed in a strange, suspended silence. Seren saw her husband at meals, where he spoke only to issue instructions or answer direct questions. She saw him in the corridors, where he nodded curtly and continued on his way. She did not see him in the evenings, when he retreated to his study, and did not emerge until long after she had gone to bed. They were strangers sharing a house, nothing more. But the children were a different matter entirely. Phineas had not warmed to her exactly, but he had stopped treating her like an enemy combatant. He answered her questions with something approaching civility. He did not put any creatures in her bed. Once, when she asked about his studies, he actually showed her the Latin translation he was working on, pointing out the difficult passages with something like enthusiasm. It was progress. Small, fragile progress, but progress nonetheless. Mirabelle remained unreachable. She drifted through the days like a ghost, present but not present, responding to nothing except her brother's touch and her father's voice. But Seren had noticed something. Every morning, the girl would stand at her bedroom window, watching the birds in the garden below. And every morning, her expression would shift, just slightly, from blank absence to something that might have been longing. Seren filed this information away and waited. On the 8th day of her marriage, the external threat arrived. She was in the morning room, attempting to write a letter to no one in particular, when Mrs. Blackett appeared in the doorway with an expression that could only be described as triumphant. "You have a visitor, Your Grace. Lady Isolde Pemberton. She is waiting in the drawing room." Seren's stomach dropped. The sister. The one who had been positioning herself as the obvious choice for Duchess. The one the Duke had married Seren specifically to thwart. Does His Grace know she is here? His Grace is in the village. I have sent word, but it may be some time before he returns. Of course it would be some time. Of course she would have to face this woman alone. Thank you, Mrs. Blackett. I will see her now. The drawing room was the grandest in the house, all gilt and velvet, and portraits of Thorne ancestors glaring down from the walls. Lady Isolde Pemberton stood before the fireplace, examining a miniature of the late Duchess with an expression of studied grief. She was beautiful. That was the first thing Serene noticed. Tall, elegant, with the same dark hair and gray eyes as the woman in the portraits. The family resemblance was striking, almost unsettling. She wore mourning colors, deep purple rather than black, and her entire bearing radiated aristocratic confidence. "Lady Isolde," Serene kept her voice steady. "I apologize for keeping you waiting." The woman turned, and her eyes swept over Serene with an assessment that was almost surgical, taking in the simple dress, the lack of jewelry, the uncertain posture of a woman who did not yet know how to be a duchess. "So you are the replacement." Her voice was silk over steel. "I confess, when I heard Kaelin had married, I expected someone more impressive. I'm sorry to disappoint." "Are you?" Lady Isolde moved closer, circling Serene like a predator evaluating prey. "I wonder. You must know how this looks. A woman of no family, no fortune, no connections, suddenly elevated to Duchess of Ashworth. People are talking. People always talk. They do. And what they are saying is not flattering." She stopped directly in front of Serene, close enough that her perfume was overwhelming. "They are saying Kaelin has lost his mind with grief, that he married the first desperate creature who crossed his path simply to avoid marrying me." "And did he?" Something flickered in Lady Isolde's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at Serene's directness. "You tell me. You were there. Did he sweep you off your feet with declarations of love? Did he promise you the world? Or did he offer you a transaction, a roof over your head, in exchange for your compliance?" Serene said nothing. "I thought so." Lady Isolde smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You should know something about my brother-in-law. He is not a man who acts without calculation. Every move he makes serves a purpose. And you, my dear, are nothing more than a pawn in whatever game he is playing. Perhaps, but I am still the Duchess. For now." The smile widened. "But titles can be challenged. Marriages can be annulled. And children." She paused, letting the word hang in the air. "Children can be removed from unsuitable environments." Serene went cold. "Is that a threat?" "It is a statement of fact. Phineas and Mirabelle are my sister's children. My blood. I have spent the last 2 years watching Kaelin mismanage their care, allowing that boy to run wild and that poor, silent girl to waste away without proper treatment. I have lodged formal concerns with the magistrate. I have allies in Parliament who share my worries. The Duke is their father. The Duke is a grief-stricken man making irrational decisions." Lady Isolde's voice hardened. "Marrying a penniless nobody is simply the latest in a long line of poor choices. When this marriage inevitably fails, when you flee as all the governesses have fled, I will be here, waiting, ready to provide the children with the stable, loving home they deserve. And if I do not flee, then I will find other ways to remove you." She picked up her gloves from the side table, pulling them on with deliberate slowness. "You seem like a sensible woman, Miss Linwood." "Oh, I apologize. Your Grace." The title dripped with contempt. "A sensible woman would recognize when she is outmatched. A sensible woman would take whatever settlement Kaelin offers and disappear quietly. I'm not going anywhere. We shall see." Lady Isolde moved toward the door, then paused, glancing back. "Give my love to the children. Tell them their Aunt Isolde will see them very soon." She swept out, leaving Serene standing alone in the gilded drawing room, heart pounding. This was not just a cold marriage to a grieving man. This was a battlefield. And she had just become a target. When the Duke returned that evening, Serene was waiting for him in his study. Lady Isolde came to visit today. He went still, hand frozen on the door. What did she want? To threaten me, to make clear that she intends to challenge our marriage and potentially remove the children from your care. His expression darkened. She has no grounds. She seems to believe otherwise. She mentioned the magistrate, allies in Parliament. Isolde has been making noise for 2 years. Nothing has come of it. Nothing came of it when you were a grieving widower. Now you are a grieving widower who has married a woman of no family, no fortune, and no reputation. Seren kept her voice steady, though her hands were shaking. I suspect that changes the calculation. He stared at her for a long moment. Then quietly, "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to tell me the truth, all of it. What happened to your wife? Why does her sister hate you? And what exactly have I walked into?" Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled against the windows like a living thing. "My wife drowned," he said finally. 2 years ago, in the lake on the estate. I know that much. What you do not know is that Mirabel was with her. Seren's breath caught. Elspeth took Mirabel to feed the swans, as she did every week. There was an accident. The boat overturned. Elspeth managed to push Mirabel to safety, but she herself... He stopped, swallowing hard. Mirabel watched her mother drown. She was 3 years old. She has not spoken a word since. The horror of it washed over Seren like ice water. That small, silent girl, that haunted absence in her eyes. She had watched her mother die. "And Lady Isolde blames you," Seren said quietly. "Lady Isolde blames everyone except herself. She believes I should have been there. She believes Elspeth should never have been allowed near the water. She believes." He turned away, shoulders rigid. "It does not matter what she believes. What matters is that she will use any weapon available to take those children from me, including you. Then we must give her no weapons to use." He looked back at her, something unreadable in his expression. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that we stop behaving like strangers who happen to share a roof. If Lady Isolde's argument is that our marriage is a sham, then we must prove otherwise. We must appear united, devoted, a proper family." "You are asking me to pretend?" "I am asking you to protect your children." She stepped closer, voice firm. "I did not agree to this marriage to become a casualty in your war with your sister-in-law. I agreed, because I had no choice. But now that I am here, now that I am Duchess, I intend to be more than a placeholder. I intend to fight." For the first time since she had met him, something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, exactly, but a flicker of respect. "Very well," he said quietly. "We will fight together." It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The weeks that followed were a careful choreography. Seren and the Duke appeared together at meals, exchanging pleasantries that almost passed for conversation. They walked the grounds in view of the servants, his hand occasionally resting on her arm in a gesture of propriety. When visitors called, they presented a unified front, 2 people building a life together after tragedy. It was all performance. But something strange began to happen within the performance. Seren started noticing things about her husband. The way he always checked on the children before retiring for the night, standing in their doorways for long moments, watching them sleep. The way his voice softened when he spoke to Mirabel, even though she never responded. The way his eyes would drift to the window during meals, looking out toward the lake he never visited anymore. He was not the cold, unfeeling man she had believed him to be. He was a man buried so deep in grief that he had forgotten how to show anything else. And then there was Phineas. The boy had become her unlikely ally, not through any declaration or sudden warmth, but through a gradual thawing that expressed itself in small ways. He would seek her out in the library, asking questions about her life before Ashworth. He would show her his drawings, detailed illustrations of birds and plants, and the occasional dragon. He would sit beside her at meals instead of across from her, close enough that their elbows sometimes touched. One afternoon, 4 weeks after Lady Isolde's visit, he found her in the garden and thrust a piece of paper into her hands. "What is this?" she asked. "A map of the estate. The governess before last made me memorize it, but I added the good parts, the places where the interesting things are." Seren studied the careful drawings, the stables, with a note that said, "Best horses here, especially the spotted one." The greenhouse marked Mirabelle's butterflies, the old folly by the North Woods labeled "good for hiding when father is in a mood," and the lake, unmarked, unnamed, a blank space where nothing was written at all. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This is wonderful. I thought you should know the estate properly, since you are staying." "Am I staying?" He looked up at her, and for the first time she saw vulnerability beneath the sharp edges. "Are you not?" "I intend to." "Good." He turned away, hiding his expression. "Mirabelle needs someone who stays. Father does too, even if he does not know it." "And you, Phineas? What do you need?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, barely audible, "I need someone who sees us. Not who Mother was or who Father used to be. Just who we are now." Seren's throat tightened. "I see you." He nodded once, sharply, and walked away before she could say anything more. That evening, she decided to try something. She gathered seeds from the kitchen, the kind used for feeding the chickens, and made her way to Mirabelle's room before the children's supper. The girl was at her window, as always, watching the garden below where the sparrows gathered in the fading light. "Mirabelle." Seren kept her voice soft. "I brought something for you." No response, no indication she had heard at all. Seren crossed to the window and set the small bag of seeds on the sill. Then she opened the window, just a few inches, and scattered a handful of seeds on the ledge outside. Within moments, a sparrow landed. Then another. Then 3 more, pecking at the seeds with cheerful abandon. Mirabelle's breath caught. It was a tiny sound, barely audible, but Seren heard it. She saw the way the girl leaned forward, the way her eyes suddenly focused, becoming present in a way they had not been before. "Would you like to feed them?" Seren asked quietly. Mirabelle did not answer, but she reached out, took a pinch of seeds from the bag, and scattered them on the ledge with careful, deliberate movements. The birds scattered, then returned, emboldened by the offering. And Mirabelle smiled. It was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, that small curve of lips, that flash of something that might have been joy. But it had happened. Serene had seen it. She left the bag of seeds on the windowsill and slipped out of the room, heart pounding. Progress. Real progress. That night at dinner, the Duke noticed something different. His eyes moved between Mirabelle and Seren, sharp and assessing. "What happened today?" he asked quietly. "I am not sure what you mean." "Mirabelle is." He paused, searching for words. "She is more present tonight. Her eyes are different. We fed the birds together, or rather, she fed them. I simply provided the seeds." He stared at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, that wall of ice cracking just slightly. "How did you know?" "Phineas told me she loved birds. Before." Seren met his gaze steadily. "I thought perhaps a connection to something she loved might reach her when words could not." The governesses tried activities. Music, painting, needlework. Nothing worked. Perhaps because they were trying to fix her rather than reach her. Silence fell between them. The fire crackled. Mirabelle was watching a candle flame with something that might have been interest. "Thank you," the Duke said finally. It was the first time he had thanked her for anything, the first time he had acknowledged her as more than an inconvenience he was forced to tolerate. "You do not have to thank me for caring about your children." "No," his voice was rough, "but I find I want to anyway." Something changed between them in that moment. Nothing dramatic, nothing declarative, just a shift in the air, a softening of the distance that had separated them. That night, Seren dreamed of the lake, of dark water closing over her head, of a woman's face, beautiful and desperate, sinking into the depths. She woke gasping, disoriented, and found herself standing at the window of her room without any memory of leaving the bed. The moon was full, casting silver light across the grounds. And there, at the edge of the lake, a figure stood alone. The Duke. She watched him for a long time, this man who had married her out of convenience, who had lost a wife he loved beyond reason, who carried a grief so heavy it had reshaped him entirely. He stood at the water's edge, unmoving, staring at the surface that had taken everything from him, and Seren understood, with terrible clarity, that he came here often, that he stood in this exact spot, night after night, torturing himself with proximity to the place where his world had ended. She should go back to bed, should pretend she had seen nothing, should maintain the careful distance that defined their arrangement. Instead, she found herself pulling on a robe and making her way through the darkened house, out the servants' entrance, across the dew-soaked grass. He heard her coming. His shoulders stiffened, but he did not turn. "You should be asleep," he said. "So should you. I do not sleep well. Neither do I. Not in this house. Not in that room." Now he did turn, and his face in the moonlight was raw, unguarded, stripped of all the walls he wore during the day. "It was her room," he said quietly. "Elspeth's. I should have told them to give you different chambers." "Why did you not?" "Because I didn't think of you at all. I thought only of the arrangement, the solution. I did not consider." He stopped, jaw tightening. "I did not consider that you might be a person who deserved consideration." "And now?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "Now, I find myself noticing things I should not notice. The way you are with the children, the way you refuse to be intimidated by Isolde or Mrs. Blackett or anyone else, the way you—" He stopped again. This was supposed to be simple, a transaction. Nothing more. Is it still simple? No. The word was barely audible. It is becoming very complicated. They stood in silence, the moon reflected in the dark water between them, and Seren felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. This was dangerous, this feeling, this softening, this tentative bridge building between two broken people. She should walk away, should protect herself from a man who had warned her explicitly that he had no love left to give. But she stayed, and so did he, and neither of them spoke of it in the morning. The complications multiplied. Seren found herself watching for Kalen at meals, anticipating his rare comments, treasuring the moments when his expression would soften as he looked at her. She found herself listening for his footsteps in the corridor, her heart jumping when she heard them pause outside her door before continuing on to his own chambers. She told herself it was proximity, circumstance, the natural result of two people trapped in an arrangement that required cooperation. But she knew it was more than that. She knew it the morning she caught herself smiling at the memory of something he had said the night before. She knew it the afternoon she spent an hour selecting a dress because she wanted him to notice her at dinner. She knew it the evening she reached for his hand, without thinking, and he did not pull away. 6 weeks into the marriage, everything changed. It began with a letter from Lady Isolde's solicitor. Formal, legal, devastating. A challenge to the marriage on grounds of fraud and coercion, coupled with a petition to review the guardianship of Phineas and Mirabelle Thorne. The Duke read it in his study, his face going white, then red, then settling into something cold and terrible. "She is actually doing it," he said, voice flat. "She is actually going to court to take my children." Seren stood across from him, hands clasped to stop them from shaking. "On what grounds?" "She claims our marriage was a sham designed solely to circumvent her legitimate claim to guardianship. She claims I am mentally unfit due to prolonged grief. She claims the children are being neglected and require immediate intervention." He threw the letter onto the desk. "She has found a judge sympathetic to her cause. A hearing is scheduled for next month. Can she win? I do not know." The admission seemed to cost him something. "She has resources, connections, a narrative that plays well with those who do not know the truth. Then we must provide a counter-narrative, evidence that our marriage is real, that the children are thriving, that you are a fit and devoted father." "Evidence," he laughed bitterly. "What evidence? We have been married 6 weeks. We barely speak. We certainly do not." He stopped, something flickering in his expression. "We certainly do not. What?" "Behave as husband and wife." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. "The locked door," Seren said quietly. "Between our chambers. She will use that. Undoubtedly." "Then unlock it." He stared at her. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that we stop treating this marriage as an arrangement and start treating it as real, not just in public, in private as well." Her voice was steady, though her heart was racing. "If Isolde's argument is that we are strangers playing a part, then we must become something more, something that cannot be dismissed or denied." "You are asking me to." "I am asking you to try, to let me in, to stop grieving alone in the dark and let someone share the weight." She stepped closer, close enough to see the conflict in his eyes. "I am not asking you to love me. I know that is not part of our arrangement. But I am asking you to trust me, to work with me, to build something real enough that no court could call it false." He was silent for a long moment, then quietly, "I do not know how to do that." "Neither do I. But I am willing to learn if you are." Something broke in his expression. Some wall, some barrier, and some piece of the armor he had been wearing since the day they met. Seren. Her name on his lips was different now. Softer. More present. "I have not been fair to you." "No. I married you for convenience. I gave you a dead woman's room. I treated you like a servant rather than a wife. Yes. And despite all of that, you are still here. Still fighting. Still trying to reach children who have every reason to reject you." He shook his head slowly. "Why?" "Because they deserve someone who tries. Because you deserve someone who sees you as more than your grief." She paused. "Because I find myself caring about this family in ways I did not expect." "Caring?" "Yes." He moved closer, and suddenly the space between them felt electric, charged with something neither of them had acknowledged until now. "I should warn you," he said quietly. "I am not a good man. I am cold, distant. I have spent 2 years walling myself off from everyone and everything. I do not know if I am capable of being the husband you deserve. I did not ask for the husband I deserve. I asked for the husband I have." His hand came up, hesitant, and touched her face. Just a brush of fingers against her cheek, but it felt like fire. "This was supposed to be simple," he said again. "You said that before." It bears repeating, but he did not pull away. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, achingly gentle. "I told you I had no love left to give. I remember. I may have been wrong. Her breath caught. Kaylin, I watch you with my children, the way you refuse to give up on Mirabelle, the way you have earned Phineas's trust when no one else could, the way you stand up to Isolde and Mrs. Blackett and everyone else who tries to diminish you. His voice was rough, cracked. I watch you, Seren. I watch you all the time, and I find myself feeling things I thought I would never feel again. What things? Hope. The word was barely audible. I feel hope. She could not breathe, could not think, could only stare at this man who had been a stranger 6 weeks ago and had somehow become the center of her world. The door, she whispered. Unlock the door. He kissed her. It was not gentle. It was not careful. It was desperate and hungry, and tasted like 2 years of loneliness finally breaking open. His hands were in her hair, pulling her closer, and she was gripping his coat like she might drown if she let go. Seren, her name against her lips. Seren, I am here. Stay. The word was fractured, vulnerable. Stay with me tonight. Not because of the court case, not because of Isolde, because I want you to, because I cannot bear another night in that empty room knowing you are on the other side of a locked door. Yes. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and his eyes were no longer ice. They were fire and grief and desperate, terrifying hope. I do not know how to do this, how to let someone in again, how to be a husband instead of just a shell of one. Then we learn together. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palm. One day at a time. One moment at a time. One night at a time. Yes. He kissed her again, softer now, and led her toward the door that connected their chambers. When he unlocked it, the sound was like something breaking free. They did not speak again until morning. But when Seren woke, warm and tangled in sheets that smelled like him, she found Kaylin watching her with an expression she had never seen before. Good morning, he said quietly. Good morning. I believe I owe you an apology. For what? For calling this an arrangement. He reached out, touching her hair, her face, and her lips. It is not an arrangement anymore. I do not know what to call it, but arrangement is no longer accurate. Then what is it? He was silent for a moment. Then, very quietly, a beginning. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was not a promise of forever. But it was enough. For now, it was enough. For 3 days, Seren lived in a dream. She woke each morning in Kaylin's arms, warm and safe in a way she had not felt since childhood. They took breakfast together, actually talking now, sharing small pieces of themselves that had been locked away for too long. He told her about his university years, the friendships he had let fade after Elspeth's death. She told him about her father's decline, the slow horror of watching everything she loved slip away. They walked the grounds together, his hand in hers, no longer performing for servants, but simply existing in each other's company. He showed her his favorite places, the old oak where he had carved his initials as a boy, the folly where he had proposed to Elspeth, the greenhouse where Mirabelle's butterflies lived. He did not take her to the lake. That wound was still too raw. But he spoke of it haltingly in the darkness of their shared bed. Spoke of the day he had received word, the way he had run, faster than he had ever run, arriving at the water's edge, just in time to see them pull his wife's body from the depths. And Seren listened, held him, let him grieve in a way he had not allowed himself to grieve before. The children noticed the change. Phineas's sharp eyes tracked them at meals, watching the way his father's hand would brush against Serene's, the way they would exchange glances, heavy with unspoken meaning. He said nothing, but something in his posture softened. Something that had been braced for disappointment began, cautiously, to relax. Mirabelle remained silent, but she was present now, in a way she had not been before. She would seek out Seren in the afternoons, appearing at her elbow with a book or a drawing, sitting beside her in companionable quiet. She still did not speak, but she had started to reach out, and that was miracle enough. On the fourth day, Lady Isolde's solicitor arrived at Ashworth Hall. Seren was in the morning room when he came, working on household accounts that Mrs. Blackett had reluctantly surrendered to her authority. She heard the commotion in the entrance hall, the raised voices, and the sound of Kaelin's boots on the marble floor. She rose to join him, but something made her pause at the door. The solicitor's voice carried clearly through the corridor. "Your Grace, my client is prepared to offer a settlement. If you agree to dissolve this marriage and grant Lady Isolde guardianship of the children, she will withdraw all challenges and allow you to maintain visitation rights." "Absolutely not." "Your Grace, I urge you to consider. The evidence we have gathered is substantial. Your wife's background, her father's debts, the circumstances of your marriage. A judge will not look kindly on a union contracted in such haste with a woman of such questionable standing. My wife's standing is not questionable. She is the Duchess of Ashworth, a title she obtained through manipulation of a grieving man. That is how the court will see it." The solicitor's voice hardened. "Your Grace, I must be frank. We have witnesses who will testify that your marriage is a sham. Servants who will describe the locked door between your chambers, the separate lives you have led since the wedding. Those witnesses are mistaken. Are they? Can you honestly tell me that you love this woman? That you married her for any reason other than convenience and spite?" Silence. Serene's heart stopped. "Your Grace, I ask again, do you love your wife?" More silence. Then, quietly, devastatingly, "Love is not relevant to a legal marriage." "Perhaps not. But it is relevant to a custody case. Lady Isolde can demonstrate genuine affection for the children. She can demonstrate years of involvement in their lives. What can you demonstrate? A hasty marriage to a stranger, a woman you admitted, just now, you do not love." "I did not say that. You did not deny it either." Seren pressed her hand against the wall, steadying herself. The ground was shifting beneath her feet, the dream of the past 3 days crumbling into dust. He had not denied it. When asked directly if he loved her, he had deflected, evaded, spoken of relevance and legality rather than feeling, because he did not love her. He had told her so from the beginning. She had simply allowed herself to forget. "Your Grace, I will give you 1 week to consider our offer. After that, we proceed to court, and I cannot guarantee the outcome." Footsteps, the solicitor leaving, the sound of the front door closing. Seren moved away from the morning room, retreating down the corridor before Kaelin could find her there, before he could see the devastation written across her face. She had been a fool, a desperate, lonely fool, who had mistaken proximity for connection and physical intimacy for emotional truth. He had needed her body to warm his bed and counter Isolde's arguments. Nothing more. The past 3 days had been strategy, not surrender, a performance for an audience of servants and solicitors. She locked herself in her chambers and did not come down for dinner. Kaelin came to the connecting door that evening. He knocked once, twice, 3 times. "Seren, please, let me in." She did not answer. "I know you heard the conversation. I know how it must have sounded. But you must let me explain." "There is nothing to explain." Her voice was flat, empty. "You told me from the beginning that love was not part of this arrangement. I should have listened. That was before. Before what? Before you needed me in your bed to convince the court that our marriage was real?" Silence. Then, roughly, "That is not what this is." "Then what is it, Kaelin?" because I heard you refuse to say you loved me. I heard you call our marriage a matter of convenience and spite. I heard you reduce everything we have shared to legal strategy. I did not know how to answer. He caught me off guard. I am not. He stopped, frustrated. I am not good with words, not about things that matter. Then perhaps you should have practiced before you unlocked that door. More silence. She could hear him breathing on the other side of the wood, close enough to touch if she reached out. She did not reach out. Serene, please. I need time. I need to think. I need to understand what is real and what performance is. Her voice cracked. I need to know if any of it meant anything at all. It meant everything. Words are easy, Kaylin. You said so yourself. You are not good with them. So perhaps actions speak louder. She pressed her hand flat against the door. Leave me alone tonight. If any of this was real, you will find a way to prove it. If it was not. If it wasn't, then I will sign whatever papers Isolde's solicitor puts in front of me, and you can find another woman to warm your bed and satisfy the court. She heard him inhale sharply, heard his fist connect with the doorframe in frustration. Then footsteps, retreating. The door between them remained closed. The days that followed were a special kind of torture. Serene emerged from her chambers the next morning, composed and distant, playing the role of duchess with mechanical precision. She managed the household. She supervised the children's lessons. She received callers with perfect grace and dismissed them with perfect courtesy. But she did not look at her husband, did not speak to him beyond what was strictly necessary, did not acknowledge the anguish she saw in his eyes every time their gazes accidentally met. Kaylin tried. She had to give him that. He appeared at her elbow with small offerings. A book he thought she might enjoy. A flower from the greenhouse. A note slipped under her door that said only, "I am sorry. Please give me another chance." She accepted the gifts, read the notes, said nothing. Because sorry was not enough. Words were not enough. She needed proof that she was more than a pawn in his game, more than a convenient solution to an inconvenient problem. And proof was not forthcoming. 1 week after the solicitor's visit, a new complication arrived. Lady Isolde herself came to Ashworth Hall, this time with reinforcements. A doctor, a magistrate, and a woman Serene did not recognize, severe and sharp-eyed, carrying a leather case filled with papers. What is the meaning of this? Kaylin's voice was ice as he confronted them in the entrance hall. A welfare inspection, the magistrate said smoothly. Lady Isolde has raised concerns about the children's care. We are here to evaluate their living conditions and their state of mind. You have no right. I have every right. The court has granted temporary authority to assess the situation before the hearing. The magistrate produced a document. You may, of course, refuse to cooperate, but that refusal will be noted in my report. Serene watched from the top of the stairs, heart pounding. Phineas stood beside her, his face pale with understanding. They are going to take us, he whispered. Are they not? No. She gripped his shoulder. I will not let that happen. How can you stop them? You are not even our real mother. The words cut deep, but she did not flinch. I am your mother now. That is what the marriage made me, and I will fight for you with everything I have. She descended the stairs, positioning herself beside Kaylin, a unified front against the invading forces. You may conduct your inspection, she said calmly, but I will accompany you. As the children's mother, I have that right. Lady Isolde's eyes narrowed. You are not their mother. You are a fortune hunter who manipulated a grieving man into a hasty marriage. I am the Duchess of Ashworth, and you are a guest in my home. I suggest you remember that. Something flickered in Isolde's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or grudging respect. Very well. Accompany us if you wish, It will change nothing. The inspection was thorough and humiliating. The doctor examined the children, asking questions about their health, their habits, and their emotional state. Phineas answered with guarded hostility. Mirabel, of course, said nothing at all. "The girl does not speak?" the doctor asked, making notes. "She has not spoken since witnessing her mother's death," Seren said. "She is not ill. She is grieving." Prolonged selective mutism is a serious condition. It requires treatment. She is receiving treatment, patience, understanding, a stable home environment. Stability. Lady Isolde's voice dripped with contempt. In a house where the Duke has married a complete stranger? Where the children are being raised by a woman who was homeless 6 weeks ago? I was not homeless. I was seeking employment. You were destitute, desperate, willing to accept any arrangement that provided shelter. Isolde moved closer, voice dropping. "I know what you are, Miss Linwood. I have made inquiries. Your father died in disgrace. Your family has been cast out of polite society. You have nothing to offer these children except the stain of your association. I have love." The word escaped before Seren could stop it. "I have devotion. I have the willingness to stay when everyone else has fled." "Love," Isolde laughed. "You have known these children for 6 weeks. You do not love them. You love the security they provide." "That is not true. Is it not? Tell me, Duchess, if Kaelin were to die tomorrow, if the title and the estate and the fortune all vanished, would you still stay? Would you still fight for children who are not your blood, in a house that is not your home, for a family that was never truly yours?" The question hung in the air, poisonous and pointed. Seren thought of Phineas, fierce and wounded, protecting his sister with everything he had. She thought of Mirabel, slowly emerging from her shell, reaching out with tentative trust. She thought of the life she had built here, precarious and imperfect, but hers nonetheless. "Yes," she said quietly, "I would stay, because they are mine now, not by blood, but by decision, and what we decide is stronger than blood." Silence fell. Even Lady Isolde seemed momentarily taken aback. Then the magistrate cleared his throat. "I believe we have seen enough. We will submit our report to the court. The hearing will proceed as scheduled." They left. The door closed behind them, and Seren found herself standing in the entrance hall, shaking with rage and fear and a desperate determination that surprised even herself. "You meant it." Kaelin's voice came from behind her. "What you said about staying. Of course I meant it. Even after everything. Even after—" He stopped. "Even after I failed to say what I should have said." She turned to face him. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes. Lines of tension carved into his face. A man on the edge of losing everything he had left. "I am still angry with you," she said quietly. "I am still hurt. But that does not change my commitment to those children. And to me?" She did not answer. Could not answer. Because she did not know. "Seren." He stepped closer. "I have something to show you. Something I should have shown you weeks ago." "What?" "Come with me. Please." He led her through the house, past the familiar corridors and rooms, to a door she had never seen opened. The attic. The stairs were narrow and dusty, clearly unused for years. Cobwebs draped the railings. The air smelled of old paper and forgotten things. At the top, Kaelin stopped before a heavy wooden door. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the handle. "No one has been in here since Elspeth died," he said quietly. "Not even me." "Then why now?" "Because you need to understand, and I need to stop hiding." He opened the door. The room beyond was a nursery, not the children's current nursery, bright and well-maintained, but something older. Original. A crib stood in the corner, covered in dust. Toys lay scattered across the floor, preserved exactly as they had been left. And on the walls, dozens of paintings, watercolors of flowers, of birds, of two small children playing in a garden. Elspeth painted these, Kaelin said. Before she died, this was her sanctuary, the place she came when the darkness grew too heavy. The darkness? She struggled. After Mirabelle was born, there were periods when she could not leave her bed for days. Periods when she would weep for hours without knowing why. His voice cracked. I did not understand. I thought I could fix it with love and devotion and sheer force of will. But some things cannot be fixed. Seren moved through the room, studying the paintings. They were beautiful but haunting. Shadows lurking at the edges, colors that seemed to bleed into each other. The work of a brilliant mind, fighting against its own destruction. The day she drowned, Kaelin continued, she had been having a difficult week. I should have stopped her from going to the lake. I should have known she was not well enough. But she begged me, said Mirabelle needed to feed the swans, said she needed to feel normal for just one afternoon. He closed his eyes. I let her go, and she never came back. It was not your fault. Was it not? I knew she was fragile. I knew the water frightened her. I knew. He stopped, a muscle jumping in his cheek. I have spent 2 years asking myself what I should have done differently. 2 years drowning in guilt and grief, and the certainty that I failed her when she needed me most. And you think if you let yourself love again, you will fail again. His eyes opened, locked onto hers. Yes, that is why you refuse to answer the solicitor. Not because you do not love me, because you are terrified of what loving me might cost. Silence stretched between them. The dust motes danced in the pale light. I watched you with the children today, he said finally, when Isolde attacked you, when the magistrate tried to intimidate you. You did not flinch. You did not waver. You stood there and declared them yours, even though you have known them for barely 2 months. Because they are mine. Yes, he moved closer. And so am I. Her breath caught. I have been a coward, Seren. I married you for convenience. I kept you at a distance to protect myself. I refused to say what I felt because feeling anything seemed like a betrayal of Elspeth's memory. He reached for her hand. But watching you fight for my children, watching you refuse to give up no matter how hard Isolde pushed, I realized something. What? Elspeth would have loved you. His voice broke. She would have seen what I see. A woman of extraordinary strength and courage and compassion. A woman worthy of being their mother. A woman worthy of... Say it. Seren gripped his hand. No more evasion. No more hiding. Say what you feel. I love you. The words hung in the dusty air, fragile and precious and terrifying. I love you, Seren. Not because you are convenient. Not because you help me fight Isolde. Because you are brave and kind, and you see my children as people rather than problems. Because you refused to give up on Mirabelle when everyone else had. Because you earned Phineas's trust when he had decided to trust no one ever again. He cupped her face with both hands. Because you make me believe that I might be capable of happiness again, that I might deserve it. You do deserve it. Her voice shook. We both do. Then forgive me. Forgive my cowardice. Forgive my silences. Forgive the weeks I wasted keeping you at arm's length when I should have been holding you close. I forgive you. He kissed her. Not desperately this time, but tenderly, reverently, like she was something precious that he had almost lost and would never take for granted again. I will tell the court, he said against her lips. I will tell everyone. I love my wife. I love her more than I thought I could ever love again. And anyone who tries to take her from me will discover exactly how far I am willing to go to keep her. The hearing is in 3 days. Then we have 3 days to prepare. He pulled back, eyes blazing with determination. Isolde wants a fight. We will give her one. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread, as word always did, and half of London society had descended upon the hearing to witness the spectacle. Lady Isolde sat with her solicitor, perfectly poised, confidence radiating from every line of her body. Her witnesses lined the benches behind her. Servants from Ashworth Hall, former governesses, a physician who had never actually treated the children, but had opinions nonetheless. Seren sat beside Kaelin, her hand clasped in his beneath the table. Phineas and Mirabel were not present, left safely at home with instructions to stay close to the butler, the only servant Seren fully trusted. The judge was elderly, stern-faced, with the air of a man who had seen every variety of human folly and was thoroughly tired of it. This court will come to order. We are here to consider the petition of Lady Isolde Pemberton regarding the guardianship of Phineas and Mirabel Thorne, minor children of the late Elspeth Thorne, née Pemberton. He shuffled papers. Lady Isolde, you may present your case. Isolde's solicitor rose. For the next hour, Seren listened to her life being dismantled piece by piece, her father's debts, her months of destitution, the hasty marriage to a man she had never met. The convenient timing, mere days before Isolde's own petition was to be filed. The servants testified about locked doors and separate lives. The former governesses spoke of the children's difficult behavior. The physician declared that Mirabel's silence was a sign of severe neglect, requiring immediate institutional intervention. Through it all, Kaelin sat rigid, jaw clenched, saying nothing. Seren felt his hand tighten around hers with every accusation, every insinuation, every lie dressed up as concern. Then it was their turn. Kaelin's solicitor called character witnesses, neighbors who spoke of the Duke's devotion to his children, the vicar who had married them, testifying to the genuine affection he had observed, the village doctor who had actually treated the children, confirming they were healthy and well cared for. And then Kaelin himself took the stand. Your Grace, the judge said, you have heard the accusations against you. How do you respond? Kaelin stood slowly. His eyes swept the courtroom, passing over Isolde without acknowledgement, before settling on Seren. I married Miss Linwood because I was desperate, he said. That much is true. I was desperate to protect my children from a woman who has spent 2 years circling them like a vulture, waiting for any opportunity to tear them from their home. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. I will admit that our marriage began as an arrangement of convenience. I will not pretend otherwise. But what began as convenience has become something far more profound. His voice strengthened. I love my wife. I love her courage, her compassion, her refusal to give up on my children, no matter how difficult the circumstances. She has accomplished in 2 months what 4 governesses could not accomplish in 2 years. My son trusts her. My daughter has begun to emerge from the silence that has imprisoned her since her mother's death. And what of the accusation that the Duchess is an unsuitable influence? The judge asked. Her family's disgrace, her period of destitution. Miss Linwood's family fell on hard times through no fault of her own. She responded to that adversity with dignity and determination, seeking honest work rather than compromising her principles. Kaelin's chin lifted. I would call that an admirable influence. I would call that exactly the kind of strength I want my children to learn. The petitioner argues that you married to spite her, to prevent her legitimate claim to guardianship. I married to protect my children from a woman who views them as property rather than people. Lady Isolde has never asked what Phineas wants. She has never considered Mirabel's needs. She has simply decided that she deserves them Because they share her blood. His voice hardened. But blood is not the same as love. And love is what my children need. He turned to face Isolde directly. You want to know why I married Seren? Because she walked into my house with nothing, absolutely nothing. And within weeks my son smiled for the first time since his mother died. Because she sat with my daughter for hours, feeding birds through a window, asking for nothing in return except connection. Because she looked at my broken family and saw something worth fighting for. Kaelin, Isolde's voice was sharp. This is theater. Pretty words designed to manipulate the court. These are not pretty words, Isolde. They are the truth. And the truth is that you do not want these children because you love them. You want them because they are all that remains of your sister. You want them because controlling them is the only way you can hold on to her memory. Isolde's face went white. I loved Elspeth, Kaelin continued, voice cracking. I loved her more than I knew it was possible to love another person. Losing her nearly destroyed me. But I cannot allow my grief to destroy our children as well. They deserve a chance to heal. They deserve a home filled with love rather than obligation. And that is what Seren gives them. Your Grace, the judge's voice was thoughtful. You speak of love, but love can be claimed by anyone. What evidence do you offer beyond words? Kaelin turned to the gallery. I would like to call one more witness. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and Mirabelle walked in. Seren's heart stopped. How had they gotten here? The butler was supposed to keep them safe. But here they were, and from the determined set of Phineas's jaw as he followed his sister, she understood. He had planned this, orchestrated it, brought his sister to fight for their family. Mirabelle stopped before the judge's bench. She looked up at the stern-faced man, then turned to face the courtroom. And she spoke. I want to stay with Papa. Her voice was rusty, unused, barely above a whisper. I want to stay with Seren. She is my mother now. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Isolde's solicitor objected. Witnesses gasped and whispered and craned their necks to see the small girl standing before the bench. But Seren heard none of it. She was staring at Mirabelle, at the child who had not spoken a word in 2 years, who had chosen this moment, this impossible public moment, to break her silence. Mirabelle. The judge leaned forward, his stern expression softening. Can you tell me why you want to stay with your father and stepmother? The girl swallowed visibly. Her hands were shaking, but her voice, when it came, was clear. Because Serene sees me. She does not try to make me talk. She does not try to fix me. She just stays. A pause. And she feeds the birds with me. Mama used to do that. And your Aunt Isolde? She says she loves you very much. Mirabelle's gray eyes moved to Isolde. Something complicated passed across her small face. Aunt Isolde loved Mama. She looks at me and sees Mama. But I am not Mama. Her voice dropped. I am just me. And Seren sees just me. The courtroom was utterly silent. Phineas stepped forward, positioning himself beside his sister. I would like to speak as well. The judge nodded. I have driven away 4 governesses, Phineas said. I put spiders in their beds, snakes. I made their lives miserable until they fled. His chin lifted defiantly. I did it because they were trying to replace our mother. They wanted us to forget her, to move on, to be normal children again. And the Duchess? Did you not try to drive her away as well? I tried. She did not leave. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She told me snakes did not frighten her. She said if I wanted to drive her away, I would have to be far more creative. Scattered laughter from the gallery. The Duchess is not trying to replace our mother, Phineas continued. She talks about Mama with us. She asks questions. She wants to know who Mama was, not to erase her, but to understand her. He looked at Serene, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. She is not our mother, but she could be, if the court allows her to stay. The judge sat back, studying the children, then Saren, then Kaelin. Lady Isolde, he said finally, do you have any response? Isolde rose slowly. Her composure had cracked, revealing something raw beneath. These children have been manipulated, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. They have been coached to say what the Duke wants them to say. I was not coached. Mirabelle's voice was stronger now. No one told me to speak. I decided to speak, because I was afraid. Afraid you would take me away from the only home I have ever known. I only want what is best for you. Then let me stay. The child's eyes were steady, ancient. Please, Aunt Isolde, let me stay. Something broke in Isolde's expression. The righteous certainty she had carried into the courtroom seemed to crumble, revealing grief and longing and a desperate love that had twisted itself into something harmful. Elspeth would have wanted, she began. Elspeth would have wanted her children to be happy. Kaelin's voice cut through the courtroom. She would have wanted them loved and safe and allowed to heal in their own time. She would not have wanted them used as weapons in a battle for control. Isolde stared at him. Tears streamed down her face. I miss her, she whispered. I miss her so much. So do I. Kaelin's voice gentled. We all do. But taking her children will not bring her back. It will only create more pain. The judge cleared his throat. I believe I have heard enough. He shuffled his papers, took a moment to compose his thoughts. The petition for change of guardianship is denied. The children will remain in the care of their father and stepmother. Relief crashed over Seren like a wave. Furthermore, the judge continued, I find no evidence of neglect or unsuitable care. The Duchess of Ashworth appears to be providing exactly what these children need: love, patience, and stability. He fixed Isolde with a stern look. Lady Isolde, I recommend you seek your own healing rather than attempting to control the healing of others. This matter is closed. He banged his gavel. The courtroom erupted again, this time in a chaos of movement and noise. Mirabelle ran to Seren, throwing her arms around her waist. Phineas followed, pressing close, his sharp edges finally softening into something that looked like trust. Kaelin wrapped his arms around all of them, pulling them close, his face buried in Seren's hair. We did it, he murmured. We actually did it. Mirabelle spoke. Seren was crying, laughing, overwhelmed. She spoke. She did. He pulled back, looking at his daughter with wonder. You did, sweetheart. You found your voice. Seren helped me find it. Mirabelle's small hand found Seren's. She made me feel safe enough to try. The crowd parted around them, curious eyes, and whispered speculation. But Seren did not care. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them spin whatever stories they wished. She had her family, and nothing else mattered. 1 year later, the gardens of Ashworth Hall were in full bloom, roses and lavender, and hollyhocks creating a riot of color beneath the summer sun. Seren walked the gravel paths, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, watching her children play. Her children. The words still sent a thrill through her. Phineas was teaching Mirabelle to fish in the small pond at the garden's edge. His voice carried across the lawn, patient and encouraging, so different from the sharp, defensive boy she had met a year ago. Mirabelle was laughing, actually laughing. The sound was still rare enough to be precious, a gift Serene never took for granted. You look thoughtful. She turned, Kaelin stood behind her, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair disheveled from whatever estate business had occupied his morning. He looked younger than he had a year ago. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it no longer consumed him. "I was thinking about the day we met," she said. "Standing in the servants' entrance, dripping wet, begging for work. You were magnificent, terrifying, but magnificent." He moved to stand beside her, arms sliding around her waist. "I knew in that moment that you were dangerous. Dangerous. To my carefully constructed walls, to my determination to feel nothing ever again." His hand covered hers on her belly. "To my conviction that I did not deserve happiness. And now? Now I know I was right. You were dangerous." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You destroyed every wall I had built, and I have never been more grateful for anything in my life." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the children, feeling the sun warm on their faces. "Mirabelle asked about Elspeth this morning," Seren said quietly. "She wanted to know what her mother's favorite flower was." "What did you tell her?" "I said I did not know, but that we could look through her paintings together to find out. There might be clues in the watercolors she made." Something soft passed across Kaelin's face. "You are remarkable, you know. Most women would be threatened by talk of a former wife. Elspeth is not a threat. She is part of who you are, who the children are. Loving you means loving all of you, including the parts that belong to her first. I love you." The words came easily now, without hesitation or fear. "I love you, Seren Thorn, more than I have words to express. I know." She smiled up at him. "You show me every day." A shout from the pond drew their attention. Phineas was holding up a small fish, triumphant. Mirabelle was clapping, face bright with joy. "Papa, Mama, look!" The boy's voice carried across the garden. "I caught one." "Papa, Mama." The words still made Serene's heart clench. "Coming," Kaelin called back. He took Seren's hand, lacing their fingers together. "Shall we go admire our son's conquest?" "In a moment." She held him back, looking up at the house that had become her home. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day, when I asked for work? I said my children needed a mother. You were right. They did." She turned to face him fully. This man who had married her out of desperation, and somewhere along the way had become the center of her world. "But you needed something too. You just did not know how to ask for it. What did I need? Someone to remind you that you were allowed to live again, that grief and joy could coexist, that loving someone new did not mean betraying someone lost." His eyes glistened. "You gave me all of that. We gave it to each other." She reached up, touching his face. "That is how love works. It is not a transaction. It is a commitment, made again and again, every day, in 1,000 small ways." "I commit to you," he said quietly. "Today, tomorrow, always. I commit to you too." He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. From the pond, Mirabelle's voice rang out. "Stop kissing and come see the fish. It is getting away." They laughed, breaking apart. "Our daughter summons us," Kaelin said. "Then we should not keep her waiting." They walked together toward the children, toward the life they had built from desperation and determination, and a love that neither of them had expected to find. Behind them, the great house stood solid and sure, no longer a mausoleum, but a home. Ahead of them, the future stretched bright with possibility. And Seren Thorn, once homeless and hopeless, once a stranger with nothing to offer but her willingness to try, walked into that future with her family beside her. Some journeys, she had learned, began with desperation. Some decisions were made when there were no other options left. But the best stories, the ones worth telling, were about what happened after. about the courage to stay when leaving would be easier, about the resolve to love when grief made love feel impossible, about the slow, patient work of building a family from broken pieces. This was her story, her family, her home, and she would embrace it again, 1,000 times over, for as long as she lived.